Hey, everybody. So, welcome to the new show that Tony Ortega and I are doing. And this is, we are just kind of approaching this with this fresh sort of, hey, Tony said, why don't we get together and do a show every week? And I said, yeah, why don't we? And so here we are. So, hey, Tony, straight up and vertical. This is after Scientology, straight up and vertical. That's what we're calling it. And as you can see, I'm joined by Tony here. We're thinking short format, 20, 30 minutes, not big, long, drawn out shows, but where we can kind of cover what happened in the last week in the world of Scientology specifically. And I can bring maybe some of my, expertise and views to this. And Tony has his views as a journalist and somebody who's actually, got boots on the ground talking about this. And we could just have some back and forth and see what y'all think about this. So here we go. So Tony, hey.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Yeah, you and I have been talking about how, we've discussed some recent stories, and time and again, what we come back to is how many people we know have left the Church of Scientology and are still going through a process. Yes. They're trying to deal with this news. They're trying to understand this news. And, that people come out in stages. And that's really interesting to both of us. And so we're kind of keeping an eye on recovery and helping people deal with getting out of this just really controlling organization. And we'll do it by talking about the news.
Exactly. And recovery is, of course, what, a big part of what my channel's all about. And so it's totally fitting that we, use this sort of framework or use this format to talk about that in relation to these stories. And so there was pretty interesting stuff that happened last week. And speaking of recovery, probably the first thing we should talk about is Jeffrey Levin's new documentary that is now on the festival circuit. It's called Broken Brothers, I believe is the title.
No, it's Brothers Broken.
Brothers Broken. That's right. Got that backwards. And you, to my surprise, Tony, featured quite prominently in the storyline. You didn't just have a couple quotes about how bad Scientology is or how whack Xenu is. You actually were a vital part of Jeff. And Jeff is somebody I've interviewed for hours on this channel years ago. But this documentary is his story put to pictures and words and music, because he's a musician, in a way that condenses so much into an hour and 10 minutes. And there it was right in the middle. You're part of it. You're part of the story, right? And I couldn't help but think of my own experience with the underground bunker. What did you think about being part of that and how it came out?
Well, I was so happy that the two of them decided to make this film. I had gotten to know the two of them. And part of the story is how these two brothers, musicians, got into Scientology. One got out before the other. And so they were separated for a long time. And Jeff was the one who stayed in, and it got really bad for him. And he was mentally in a very bad place, to the point where people were concerned that he was going to survive.
Yeah, real severe depression. Real severe
depression. Yeah. And then he told me at some point he ran across my website and started reading about Scientology in ways that he'd never thought of before. And then he reached out to me. And we started talking secretly, quietly. And he talked about how much this helped him, put things in perspective. And then I think what they wanted to talk to me about was that he decided to start taking part in the comments. He was kind of putting his life back together and getting some confidence. And so he made up a name and he came into the comments, and I knew who that was and what he was going through. And I watched him kind of get more and more confident, to the point where I was starting to get a little worried, Chris, because he was starting to drop some bombs in the comment section. And I thought, they're going to figure out who you are, buddy. You better be careful. But it was just, the story is really about the brothers and how they reunited. but I was just very fortunate that I played a small part in Jeff really getting control of his life again. And it came through taking part in the underground bunker. So I'm just really happy. And I hope that I have heard from other people that have talked about, again, that's the point of this show. We're talking about how people come out of Scientology and it's bewildering for them. They have a hard time understanding the way Scientology is thought of by the public, and putting L. Ron Hubbard in context. So I'm just really glad that got to be a part of this documentary, which is now in a festival. I'm so happy for the two of them.
Oh, me too. I was shocked in getting his whole story. Even, like I said, even though I'd interviewed the guy for hours, right? And yet this documentary, actually, I got to say, it just does a better job. I mean, it really puts it all together. And I was shocked at the parallels to my own story and the story of so many other people. And for fear of, sounding like we're doing, awful self-promotion here, it's just the fact that your blog has helped, a lot of people out. And I can speak from my own experience to that getting little bits of truth, little nuggets of information, a little bit at a time on a daily basis, it really, really helps plant seeds. It really helps start stripping some ideas away. It answers questions people have who are stuck in Scientology, who aren't getting the answers. Like, why is this happening? What's this about? What happened to Joe Schmo? What happened to Sally Sue, right? Now we know. There they are, and we find out. Huge help in resorting out and figuring out what the hell's going on with Scientology. So and also, like, of course, I have to say, I started commenting on the bunker. I started writing some things for you, and that's how they figured out who I was. They told me straight up in a meeting. They were like, we figured out exactly who you were because you were writing on Tony's blog. And I was like, well, okay. So whatever, do I regret it? Fuck no, I don't. Pardon my French. So there we go. So I can't. I've been promoting that documentary on the film circuit there. I've been promoting it on my social media and stuff. I really hope people will watch that.
Yeah, and it's the first, really new documentary in a while that, doesn't involve some different people than we're used to seeing. And so I think people should give it a shot. Jeff and Robbie they're great people. And Jeff's story in particular, he came back from the brink, man.
Yeah. And
I really have a lot of respect for him. And he's a really talented artist, and he still wants to create great stuff. So I haven't seen the latest cut. I saw some early cuts, and I'm really looking forward myself to seeing this new festival version. And I'm glad that you liked it.
Oh yeah, big time. And just to give everybody in the audience just a little bit more context, if you don't know who Jeff is. The Dianetics jingle, the that whole 1980s commercial thing, we talk about Jeff Hawkins being the mastermind of that, but those commercials don't work without that music. And guess who put that together? This guy, Jeff, right? And he also put together some other musical work that Scientology has made some real public forward strides with in the human rights area. There was this whole song and these PSAs that they put together on human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it's peak irony that Scientology would do something like that. But Jeff's the one who did a lot of the music for those things. And anybody who thinks music doesn't matter, it is everything to getting these messages across to people. So he's had some impact in the world of Scientology. He's not just some guy. He really helped Scientology in significant ways. And that's one of the reasons it was so hard for him to get out.
Absolutely. And one of the odd things about he and his brother and their band, People, when they joined the Sea Org, they joined as a band.
Yeah.
Not all the members, but most of them. Yeah. They joined the Sea Org as a band to promote Scientology. So anyway, there's lots in this documentary. People should go see it, and it's at the Cinequest Film Festival, I think.
Awesome. And so there were a couple other stories that got published this week that are definitely worth talking about in terms of people taking action against Scientology. And there's two cases that specifically that are very, very hot right now in the sort of Scientology world, which is the human trafficking lawsuit being filed in Florida in federal court. And there is the Valerie Haney case, which has been put into arbitration. The judge said, oh, no, you're going to have to go follow that contract. And so now they have named who those arbiters apparently are going to be within the world of Scientology. That's the latest step forward in that case this week, yeah?
Yeah, so Valerie Haney sued Scientology in 2019 because she said she was basically kidnapped in the Sea Org. And then, remember, she's the one that escaped from it based in the trunk of a car.
Yeah.
Went to work for Leah Remini. She said she was stalked and libeled. She sued over all these things. But Scientology, as it does, when ex-Scientologists sue, they whip out contracts and say, nope, you signed a contract saying you're never going to sue us. You can't sue us. You have to go to what's called religious arbitration instead. And the judge in that case said, yep, that contract is valid. You're going to have to go to arbitration. So she's been fighting that. And the new judge in that case said, look, you gotta get this going or you risk the lawsuit itself being kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step in that is to find these arbitrators. And of course, Valerie doesn't like the idea of going to her abusers because they tell her she can't even use attorneys and things like that. So she's nominated Tom Cruise, she's nominated Elizabeth Moss, she's nominated Shelley Miscavige. And they went to the court and they complained. Scientology said, oh, she's being obstructionist. These are clearly not serious. But then this last week, Chris, Graham Barry has really stepped up in her case.
Yeah.
And he came into court and says, look, there's nothing in the rules, Scientology rules, that says that she can't nominate Tom Cruise.
That's right.
So stop acting like she did something wrong. And so this time they gave 15 names: Jenna Elfman, Giovanni Ribisi, Rebecca Minkoff, John Cole. And, I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but now the upshot is Scientology's come back into court a week later and said, okay, one of them said yes. Well, which one? Well, they don't name it in the court papers. So I don't know how long it's going to be before we hear who of those 15 chose. And of course, it said yes. And it's an interesting list. I mean, there's people like, Pat Harney, the spokesperson in Clearwater. There's Grant Cardone, the clownish motivational speaker. There's Bob Duggan, the richest Scientologist in the world, is on that list. Yep. Eric Geisler, the guy I called the spy in the hallway at the Danny Masterson trial last fall. So which one of them said yes? It's very intriguing. Meanwhile, Scientology also said in court this week that they have chosen an arbitrator. Again, they're not naming the person. So now they have the two first arbitrators, and by their rules, those two will choose a third. So that means this thing's ready to go, Chris. I guess that Valerie's actually going to have to go through with this. And what that means is you remember the only other time there's been a court-ordered arbitration is with the Garcias. They went through it. They were not allowed to have an attorney. They couldn't have a smartphone with them. They weren't. There was no transcript kept. They brought like 900 pages of documents, 90% of which the IJC said, no, you can't use that.
Right.
I mean, it's a joke. It's all a joke. And, but see, at this point, Scientology sets all the rules. I know I get asked all the time, by California law and arbitration, she has to have an attorney. It's not, they're beyond the law now. It's Scientology rules now. Exactly. So Scientology sets all the rules and I don't know what's going to happen. I assume it's going to be a kangaroo court like last time. And then I guess Valerie will afterwards go to the judge and say, okay, you got to call this all null and void because it's a joke. But we'll see. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, I want to find out who that arbitrator is. But that's the latest in Valerie's case.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard for people to get their wits around this because we've only really talked in the terms of Scientology and how they have corrupted the entire process of arbitration, religious arbitration, which is a thing that is actually legally recognized is assumed to be a fair and valid process because, let's face it, most of the time it kind of is. It's actually kind of run by judges, retired judges, arbitrators, mediators, people who know what they're doing. And synagogues and Christian groups and other groups will use this to sort out problems with their congregations or with people who have a problem with the organization. And they sort it out in a fairly fair and mostly transparent process. So it can get this really bad rap when it's actually Scientology screwing this up so bad, which is what they do with everything. They corrupt everything to their own, favor, in their own favor. And that's what goes on here.
I mean, look, the people that are suing, these ex-Scientologists in these various lawsuits, from the Garcias to the Baxters to Valerie to the Masterson accusers, they're not just suing because they have been wronged and they want Scientology to make it up to them. They're suing because they want Scientology exposed.
Exactly.
They want them to be pulled into court and for testimony to be given and the world to see what Scientology does to people. So even if this was independent arbitration, it would be something that these plaintiffs would probably be against because that takes place behind closed doors.
Fair. Yes. Yes.
But if it was independent arbitration, it would at least be fair. It probably would not be what they want because it'd be behind closed doors, but it'd be fair. I mean, they basically get a retired judge who listens to both sides and then renders a verdict. But it's not even that. It's Scientology's own internal religious arbitration, which requires a panel of 3 arbitrators who have to be Scientologists in good standings. In other words, it's a ComEv. It's a court-martial.
That's right.
And it's absolutely ludicrous. And I don't understand why these judges can't see that. I was just over in Israel and I was spending a little time with Danny Lemberger again.
Yeah.
Who was an independent there. And he sued Scientology a few years ago. And he said to me, Tony, they didn't even think about bringing that whole arbitration thing up in an Israeli court because they knew an Israeli judge would never put up with that. They would immediately see this would be completely unfair. I mean, I don't understand. I agreed with him. I don't understand why these American judges cannot see how inherently unfair it is to hand this over to a Scientology court with Scientology arbitrators. It's just insane.
It's mind-boggling. And I've had to sort of surmise 2 things. One, they have over full dockets. They just anything they can do to unload cases. And 2, there is this almost, I don't want to over exaggerate this, but it really feels from all the years of watching this, and you've been watching it more years than me, so maybe you tell me, it really feels like these judges are in terror of somehow judging a religion. The First Amendment comes in and they just lose their minds. Where NXIVM, for example, it's a clear-cut case of sexual abuse and harassment and torture and false imprisonment and fraud. And it's all clear as day because it's NXIVM, a business. You put that into a religious setting and somehow all bets are off and they can get away with whatever they want because it's all faith-based or some nonsense. Same kind of abuses in the same kind of way, but religion's added on top of it, and I get a little bitter about that, but maybe overly so. How do you see these?
Well, I think there's some of that, but I think there's also, if you look at the pleadings and you look at the way Scientology attorneys characterize things, and how Scientology talks about itself. If you're a judge who doesn't understand the basic difference between the Church of Scientology and the Church of whatever, you look at that and it looks like, okay, well, this is a, legitimate organization making legitimate sounding arguments and we have to take it, the American courts just don't seem set up to understand that this is a bad faith organization that lies about itself in virtually every situation.
Yeah, there you go. That's
you can see it. I mean, sometimes I put these documents up and you can look at it. You look at how William Foreman is describing David Miscavige and the Church of Scientology. You're just like, That's insane. That's not what Scientology is. And these courts just always sort of like, well, maybe they seem to they have expensive lawyers,
Right.
and they just never these. In fact, that's one of the craziest things about this case in Tampa. If we
Yeah,
shift
segue over to that. Yeah.
is that these three former Sea Org workers, Valeska Paris and Gawain and Laura Baxter, who served on the Free Winds, are suing for labor trafficking, alleging that they were treated horribly, basically as slave labor on Scientology's cruise ship. And again, Scientology is saying, no, you signed contracts, you can't sue us. And in this case, the judge, based on his questions, it's clear he understands that these contracts were probably signed under duress.
Yeah.
He even asked Scientology's attorney at one point, if we had video of one of these Sea Org members
Yes.
signing one of these contracts and there was literally a gun to their head visible on the video, you would say this was not duress and the contract is still valid? And the Scientology attorney said, yes, Your Honor.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we know this because Mark Bunker was there and wrote a report for us. Thank you, Mark. And it's just stunning. So in other words, the judge gets it.
Right.
But he has literally asked both sides, does the law allow him to make a ruling on that? In other words, this arbitration law, the way it's the Supreme Court has ruled on it, it looks like even if the judge personally believes that these poor workers were forced into this situation, he doesn't have standing to say so.
And that boggles me.
This is a federal district judge. This is like one of the most powerful people in our society.
Yeah.
And he can't say what's right in front of his face because the Supreme Court has said, no, you got to let the arbitrators decide that.
I was boggled when I first read that. I'm still boggled by it. I guess this is Scalia who wrote the opinion on this?
Yeah, and I don't want to put it all on Scalia.
Sure. It's the Supreme Court. Yeah.
There's a whole history of case law that kind of goes along this, but the most recent ruling on this came from Justice Antonin Scalia in 2006. And it's very, I remember when I was trying to understand this stuff I was talking to my attorney, Scott Paludic, and he was saying, listen, Tony, this is difficult even for lawyers to understand. It's really arcane. Okay. But essentially it comes down to, if they're complaining about the whole contract, the judge can decide if it's valid or not. If they're only I'm sorry. See, I'm even getting it backwards. It's so hard. If they're arguing about the whole contract, the arbitrator decides. But if they're arguing only about the arbitration clause, the judge can decide something. I don't know, it's so
something
complex
like that.
And so Scientology is saying, hey, look at their pleading. They're complaining that this is where it's so incredible. So Scientology is saying that Valeska and the Baxters in their pleadings are saying, hey, we were forced to sign this document and we couldn't even read it. And Scientology is saying, see, they're saying they couldn't read the document, not just the arbitration clause. So they're actually using the duress against Valeska and the Baxters.
And it's only in this world of Scientology does that make sense.
I mean, it's just so insane.
Ugh.
You can see the judge just sort of like, can you guys figure out if I can actually rule on this or not? I mean, a district U.S. judge.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what we're waiting for. Is both sides have now argued that point and responded to each other. And Judge Barber, it's in Judge Barber's lap. We're just going to have to wait. Sometimes district judges can take a while to rule. And he's also got a rule on Miscavige objecting to being named the defendant and served.
Yeah. So, what is now? I'm a little confused by that because I thought, and again, this is where my legal knowledge just kind of falls to the wayside, because he was served, or they tried to serve him 72 times or something.
27.
27. Okay, clearly avoiding service.
Right.
Right. I mean, clearly,
yeah.
And playing the court. Because, oh, no, he lives in California. Oh, no, he lives in Florida. Oh, no, he lives in California, right? This back and forth bullshit. So didn't the judge say, okay, he served or what? And then Miscavige came back with, oh, no, I'm not. But what happened there?
At the federal level, there's a district judge. He's Judge Thomas Barber. Yeah. He's the guy in charge of this whole case. Yeah. But for that matter, he had his magistrate judge, Judge Julie Sneed, handle that particular part of it. Oh. And so she then took arguments and did a nice ruling, well put together ruling saying, look, they've tried, they've done everything they have to do. He's evading service. And that's what drives Scientology crazy is a magistrate judge, U.S. magistrate judge on paper saying that David Miscavige is evading service. I mean, that's just really, really bad. Yeah. And so she decided that he has been served by substitute service. He is a defendant of the case. Now they're doing sort of a mini appeal. Miscavige's attorney is doing sort of a mini appeal from the magistrate judge up to the district judge himself, Barber. I'm told this is pretty standard. I still think it's outrageous, but it's pretty standard just to make this sort of mini appeal real quick. And they're now going to Judge Barber and saying, Magistrate Judge Sneed messed up. She got things wrong. And they're turning it on mainly, again, this is what drives me crazy. It's another perfect example of Scientology and their documents. If you remember, Chris, back in 2013, when Monique Rathbun sued Church of Scientology, they also, like the Baxters, not only sued various entities like Church of Scientology, Religious Technology Center, but also David Miscavige. Mm-hmm. And of course, because as all ex-Scientologists tell us who worked in that organization, he oversees everything. Nothing happens without David Miscavige, his control. So of course you name him as a defendant, right? Right. But in that case, he sent an attorney down saying, I'm not accepting anything. I'm not really in this case. And the reason is David Miscavige does no business in Texas. That was his excuse 10 years ago, right? And you could almost see it. It's like, yeah, Scientology's based in California and Florida. There's a mission in Houston. There's an ideal org in Dallas. Clearly, he does do business in Texas, but he probably doesn't spend much time there. So it was outrageous, but not, but you could, okay. That's
sort of see it. Yeah.
Okay. Now he's being sued in Tampa, Florida.
Right.
Which is just how many, just
down the road, right? From
the Fort Harrison Hotel, the flag building, everything else. And I was like, I was prepping my readers. It's like, are they going to do what I think they're going to do? And sure enough, in this objection to the magistrate judge, David Miscavige's attorney, who's the past president of the Florida bar, by the way, came into court and actually said, David Miscavige does no business in Florida.
I can't believe the guy actually managed to say that with a straight face, even knowing what he would have to know as Miscavige's attorney.
All you got to do is go to Scientology TV. They show the same clip 24 hours a day of David Miscavige in the flag building saying, welcome to my new TV channel.
Exactly. And what do you think all the events that they're holding at all the orgs right now, all over the world, are David Miscavige briefing from, guess where? Flag.
Fort Harrison Hotel. That's right. Absolutely.
That's right.
It's just, so that's kind of the basis of, they're making these arcane arguments that, okay, but when he is in Florida, he's just as the, chairman of the board of RTC. It's not personal. He's not personally making money. It's not an individual working there. So we'll see. So now these two major things are before Judge Barber. Is he going to deny the objection and affirm that Miscavige is a defendant? Is he going to grant Scientology's motions for arbitration? I can actually see a split decision, Chris. I can see him on one day saying, yes, David Miscavige is a defendant. He's been served. And then the next day saying, but this case is derailed. Yes. Yeah. Go do arbitration. It's
I
I don't
know
know.
it's
It's
tough. It's a
crazy.
tough one. And this is one of the things, just to speak to the, sort of cult recovery, cult post-life kind of thing here with this is, one of the things that we get really involved in as ex-cult members as a community is we really want these cases to succeed. We really want them to take the Scientology to the mat. And we really do want them to expose the abuses and the nonsense and the human rights violations that are alleged, because we as ex-members know that those things are true. We had our own experiences with them. We don't have questions or doubts or reservations about that. So in a way, this becomes representative for all of us, and that's why we become so invested in them, which was why the Rathbun case, for example, was such a devastating blow when Marty pulled the plug and then went back to working for Scientology. And nobody really cares why he did that. He did it. And that's the bottom line, And it's like, fuck that guy. I mean, how, because all of us got so invested in that. And I get that. It's very emotional for me, and I know it's very emotional for a lot of people in this community, right? To feel invested in this and want this to succeed and to work. And in a way, this is part of our catharsis. Is seeing this.
That's a great point, because I know in some cases I worry a little bit that people get too invested in.
Yeah.
And you have to understand, when you're the plaintiff and you're suing the Church of Scientology, it's a very scary place to be. And they try to turn your life upside down.
Yeah.
And so I always try to remember that if they end up getting a big settlement and the case goes away, you got to remember, I know people get their own investment in it and what they want to see out of it. But those people, they have to think about the peace in their life, And so now
Absolutely.
Marty's a different situation, because they were in a great position to cause Scientology a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And they walked away and their attorneys got nothing. That's a different situation.
Oh, completely.
But
it wasn't even a settlement. It was just a straight up pull the plug and screw my own lawyer in the process.
Right. But in
Yeah.
other cases, okay, let's say Laura DiCrescenzo, for example.
Right.
This, Laura went through 9 years of trying to get to trial, and her case got kicked out at one point. It got restored later. She had to go through 2 motions for summary judgment, 2 mini trials. They took it to the U.S. Supreme Court, Scientology did, to try to keep her from getting her own records. So, finally trial was set, and we were literally just a couple of days away from trial starting. And then David Miscavige wrote a big check, made it go away.
Yep.
Now, I know there are people who were disappointed, but I was so happy for Laura, because she had gotten through so much to get to that point. And what more do people want from her? I mean, she had already exposed Scientology so much in those documents.
That's right.
So I think people need to keep that in mind, as if, of course, the rest of us get really invested in it. And I'm sure for ex-Scientologists, this does become a part of their recovery, is to, root people on. We want to see Valeska get those, get that, just get Miscavige on in a deposition would be really nice.
Yes.
But we also have to consider what they're going through. Right now, it's just really hard for ex-Scientologists to sue Scientology.
Exactly. That's the whole point, right? Is people talk about class action. Please stop talking about that, right? People talk about doing this and doing that, and the criminal case and how the marshals are coming for Miscavige. And it's like, guys, we gotta temper this with some reality, right? That's just not the world we live in. That's a TV world, right? That's the TV idea of justice. The real world is a lot harder than that. And the point you made about what these ex Scientologists have to go through is no joke. Masterson's victims, Valeska and Gawain and his wife, and Valerie Haney, right, and Leah Remini to this day, Mike Rinder even to this day, Mark and Claire down the road from me. These guys get a lot of shit from Scientology, even to this day. And they don't even get to talk about it.
Right.
I'm
smiling because I'm remembering when Lawrence Wollersheim finally got his money. Wollersheim sued. I mean, his case started in the 70s or something. Anyway, in the mid 80s, he got this $30 million judgment. It got reduced, but then over time, the interest got so high, it finally got to be they wrote him a check for $9 million. but it took him like 26 years. And I'll never forget, I called him up. I wanted a quote. So I was covering this. This was back in 2002. And I was asking him, okay, you finally got your money. It took you 26 years. I need a quote from you. And he said, I just hope my example serves for other people that they should come forward and sue the Church of Scientology. That's really what you want people to take from your saga, that it took you 26 years?
Right.
And basically everything he got at that point was going to attorneys. So
$9 million. Jesus, man. Yeah. And what you going to do? Right. It's, okay, we're going to have to start moving toward wrapping up. We've covered this stuff this week.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really good. I'm really happy that we got to talk about this and talk turkey about it, because this is important stuff. And I really want people to get it. I've spent hours and hours with attorneys on my channel. You've, written volumes on this, and it's still getting that message across to people that, that real justice in the real world, the real legal system, ain't got nothing to do with Law and Order or any of the crap you watch on TV. It's a lot more painful. It's a lot slower, and it's way more difficult. And I really feel for these ex-Scientologists who really have they're just so much courage being demonstrated in what they are doing. It's not just about recovery. It's about really taking the fight back to them. And that is something to be really, really admired, just for making the effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think you're right to put that in context too of recovery. And look, these are very important lawsuits, and right now they've not been going well. The one exception is the Masterson accusers, who their civil lawsuit got restored.
Yep.
Right now it's on hold until the criminal case, but after the criminal case, I think that civil lawsuit could get really interesting. They're in a much better position. So anyway, very interesting things happening right now, and we'll get you updates when we can.
That's right. All right, folks. So let us know what you think. Our first episode here we are, our pilot. We're going to be doing this every week. And we're sort of planning on doing this kind of a talk, right? But again, you give us some feedback. Let us know your thoughts on that, including maybe even what day should this drop. I've scheduled it right now for Mondays each week, because I already have content dropping on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I don't want to overload you guys any more than I already do with all the stuff I put out. But if Mondays, if you want to see it earlier or later or whatever, anyway, let us know. Okay. We're still figuring this out.
And in the meantime, please come by tonyortega.substack.com, sign up for free emails. You'll see these stories come out the minute they do.
That's right.
So thank you very much, Chris. This has been fun.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tony. Talk to you guys soon next week. Bye-bye.